Hello guys and welcome back to All for United. We have a academy show again for you today on Reds Roundup. My partner in crime Benny is back. Thankfully I'm not on my own this week, so let's just get straight into it.
Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from passionate Reds, only on All for United.
And there we are, Benny. How are you doing? You obviously were ill last week. Are you feeling any better this week?
Oh, much better, mate. At least I could talk this week. I think last week would have been a bit of a nightmare. I do apologise to people that wasn't on, but I'd have probably been holding sheets of paper on my question because I just could not talk. So I do apologise for being away, but it was a cracking show nonetheless, mate. I've watched it back 2 or 3 times. Really, really good show. Really, really positive show compared to the absolute positivity that we had all that week as well, which helped. You know, it was nice to have a positive, a fresh outlook from different fans across the country.
Yeah, definitely. If you're wondering what show we're referring to, last Wednesday we did a show with a Swansea and Birmingham fan talking about Tees Chong and Ethan Letter's respective loan deal. So go and check that out. Make sure you're liking the video, subscribing. Make sure you get your questions in. We'll be talking everything academy related in about 10 minutes time. But just very briefly, like I said, we're going to talk about United Spurs because it is Reds Roundup. We talk about all the results of the weekend. So Benny, obviously you're probably the only person on All for United that hasn't given your view across yet on the 3-0 win over Spurs. Obviously, last time you were on, the Liverpool game, won't go back over that. But so, how are you feeling? Obviously, 3-0 winners over Spurs. We bounced back, didn't we? That's a positive.
That is definitely a positive, mate. I think a better outlook from the team, better outlook from the manager. You know, better formation. I think that's the way we've got to go now. I think for the next 2 or 3 games, see if we can settle in a little bit more. You know. See if we can make that work to our advantage. I think we look better in there, a lot more comfortable at the back. We don't look as shaky at the back either. I think it suits Lindelof a lot more, I think, more than anybody as well. And it definitely suits Maguire having Varane back because that leadership at the back, that know-how, that world-class footballing brain that Varane possesses, it makes everything look so easy at the back there, you know. I think that certainly helps. Obviously, I know we're going to be missing Pogba for the next couple of league matches still as well. So I think that works in our favour in the league. The Champions League, where Pogba can play, it'd be interesting to see whether he does come back in for Atalanta, whether Bruno may get a rest or whether he tries to fit Bruno in there, Pogba in there with Bruno. And we may be one of the holders dropping out, like for Fred and McTominay. We'll have to wait and see what he goes for in midfield for that. But decent result, 3 really decent finishes as well, mate. You know, Ronaldo's was the pick of the bunch, as everybody will probably agree. But the Cavani goal, that Ronaldo pass was unreal, mate. I tell you, little thread through ball. Cavani's on it. He's not missing from there. Just didn't get over the keeper. And I thought Rashford was a decent finish as well. You know, Rashford was at 4 in his last 5 games now, something like that. You know, quality for Rashford, that, you know. I did say a fully fit Marcus Rashford would be absolutely firing all cylinders. Let's be fair, though, the last couple of seasons where we've not had a fully fit Marcus Rashford, we've been banging in 24 goals respectively, you know. Imagine what a fully fit Marcus Rashford's going to start smashing in, you know. And I'm glad that he's back. I know people are saying, well, what does that mean for Jadon Sancho? 74 million quid signing on the bench. But I still think Sancho's still grown into the team, grown into the game, get used to English football again. It's not like the German football where you can have a million years on the ball, you know, time to pick out the right pass, pick out the right cross, time to run at your full-backs. In English football, you get no time. People are on you in a split second. I think he's still settling in, you know. I think it's a lot different to the Donny van de Beek situation. If I'm being totally honest, people are saying, "Oh, he's ruining Sancho like he's ruined Donny van de Beek." Has he really ruined Donny van de Beek now? Because is Donny van de Beek doing enough in training to warrant a place in the team? Is he doing enough when he gets the chances in the first team to warrant more minutes on the field? I think that's all questions that you've got to ask as well. But but we're really good. All right, fair enough. People are going to point out and say, "Oh, it's Spurs, Ben." Spurs are struggling to just sack their manager today, looking like they're bringing in Conte. But you can only play what's in front of you. I thought we did pretty well. They had a couple of chances. That Son one I thought that was in. Then when Son had that touch, and then if he took it with his left foot, I believe it was, with the foot they had a touch with, I think he'd have definitely scored that. And there are a few dangerous moments. I think, to be fair, Harry Kane doesn't look the player that he was at the minute. I don't think he wants to be there, to be honest with you. He gives it that body language. That's why he was getting booed by his own fans, I don't think that guy wants to be there.
I've heard that ever since. Sorry to put in, but I've heard that ever since Spurs. It's only Spurs, but we've been struggling against teams like only Spurs for the last 2 months. You can say Southampton, drew away there, didn't play well against Wolves, lost to Villa at home, drew to a poor Everton side. So I think in Ole's defence, I know a lot of people are not going to defend him, but he had to get a result, and more importantly, a clean sheet. So I don't know what the stat was, 1 clean sheet in 20 games or something like that. He needed to get a clean sheet. And so just my final question on the back of the Spurs game. Can you see him doing this back 5 formation until we get a run of games going? Because the last thing he's going to want is to do back 5 against Spurs, maybe Atalanta, change it up against City, lose, and then we're back to where we started.
I think he will do. The key being what's happening with Pogba, because obviously we know Pogba's going to be out the next couple of league games anyway. So I think definitely for the league, I definitely get City will go for it. It's the Atalanta one, whether he does against Atalanta tomorrow night. I'm just trying to think whether he might change it up with Pogba being available for the Champions League, whether he might go back to his regular formation, whether he might even go a different formation. But if I was Ole, I'd stick to this, and then the interesting thing is when he dropped one of his holding midfield players, when he dropped one of the MUFC partnership, as people like to call them, drop one of them and maybe put Pogba in there and see how it goes with Pogba with 5 at the back, and let Pogba maybe have a little bit more of a free role. But it all depends, because obviously then you're saying, oh, well, Bruno Fernandes, what you're going to tell him to drop a bit deeper. And I suppose, listen, it's all questions, I suppose, especially for the Atalanta game. But I don't think Ole will change it. I think he'll have at least the next 2 matches, I think, especially going into City, I think, just to see how this 5 at the back goes. I know listen, it's worked for him in the past against bigger sides. We beat City on it last season with 5 at the back. And I believe that we beat Liverpool in the Cup as well, playing 5 at the back. So it does work for us. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I can't see him changing. And if he does, changing from a winning formation at the weekend and change it to the Champions League to possibly change it again back to that winning formation for City may confuse and unsettle a few players. So I think while we've got that victory under our belt, while everything's, we've got good karma going through the team, I think we should just keep the way it is. And then it's up to him whether he brings Paul Pogba back in or keeps him on the bench, brings him off the bench later on in the game.
Yeah, I agree. I think the key word, consistency. It's something we've not had for a long, long time. And I think as long as we're winning, I don't care who he plays. I said this after the Liverpool game, that he needs to pick a team to win a game. I don't really care who it is. As long as we win the game, he could play Phil Jones up front for all I care. As long as we win the game, it's irrelevant to me. So as long as we can get some consistency and get a run together, then so be it. Obviously, it's just unfortunate if we do get back-to-back wins and it's international break and got to kind of go again after the international break. So, yeah, I think it's just consistency. Whatever formation he wants to stick with, whether that's 5 at the back, 3 at the back, 4 at the back, whatever, just needs to get that into the players and just fit the system in and around the players that he thinks are going to win that particular game, because he's going to be based on results. And if you believe what you read, then it's the next 2 games are as important as they're making out. So we'll move away from Spurs, unless Benny, you're going to make a quick point there on.
No, move away.
Okay.
Let's get Tony in.
No, sorry. Well, there we go then. Let's just get him straight in. Brilliant to have you back, Tony. How are you doing?
Good, lads. How about you? How are you keeping?
Good, much better than last week after Liverpool, for sure. So we'll go straight into the under-23s, and obviously one team that didn't beat Spurs last Saturday was the under-23s, a 1-0 loss, it was a late goal, I believe it was, 92nd minute winner from Spurs. What were your kind of thoughts just around that game in particular? Because there was a lot of what you'd class there's no real senior guys in the 23s. Ahmad was there, Shoretiri, Alanga, Mengi, I think were there. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that particular game? And then we'll talk about the 23s as a whole in a minute.
There's a couple of things. First of all, there's been some really surprising decisions. I think I alluded to it on the last show, where for some unbeknown reason, the Premier League or the FA are not allowing games to be shown live if it clashes with any first team games. And apparently this has been a loophole in the system for I don't know how many years, but no one's ever worried about it because it's under 23 football. And with COVID, no one's getting into grounds anyway. So it's not like, you're taking away revenue from, people attending the matches. But apparently my sources tell me that some person, a lady of some sort, has been put in charge of this role with the Premier League or the FA. And she's come across this thing, and now she's enforcing it. It's never been enforced before. So as a consequence, for some reason, the club is now scheduling all these games at the same time. So we had the under-18s kicking off against Derby at 12 o'clock away. The under-23s kicking off at Spurs 12 o'clock away, with the first team kicking off at 5:30, obviously. But because it clashed with some other first team game in the Premiership with the midday kickoff, so we couldn't show the game on MUTV. And so as a consequence, it's not only ridiculous, frustrating. I can rant and rave about whoever's these policymakers are. They're just Jobsworths who really don't understand what youth football and following youth football is all about. But anyway, so as a consequence, it's really hard to give an opinion on a game when you're following it on a stream, a text stream, not a video stream, but a text stream. So what I do know is that the game was pretty even. We had numerous opportunities to win the game, and our finishing in the final third probably let us down. But we certainly weren't outplayed or outclassed in any shape or form during that match. And as you know, with all football, you're at your most dangerous in the last few minutes when you've not taken your chances. And Spurs took their chance, and it was one of those things that happens in football. So, but what it does show, in my opinion, is it shows the jump from academy football to under 23 and under 23 to the first team. So you've got the likes of Charlie McNeil and Joe Huggle, who last year were playing under 18 football, and they've been asked to make a jump into under 23s in their first season for all intents and purposes. And the finishing is much harder at this level. Charlie McNeil was only one of 2 or 3 players in our academy since 1999 anyway, to have scored more than 20 goals in an academy season. Obviously, before the academy, there was loads of lads scoring loads of goals, but we'll just talk about academy for the time being. So he had huge pedigree, and he's a very good player. But doing it at under 23 level against experienced centre halves who've got league experience, perhaps been out on loan places, particularly the Spurs, the Chelsea, some of these big clubs, I think they're really struggling. So when you're not scoring a lot of goals, it puts an awful lot of pressure on the defence. And so what you'll find that we have lost by the odd goal, apart from the West Ham game the week before. We've not been absolutely thrashed at all. We've been losing out by small margins. And that's a learning process. So I'm not overly perturbed by it. In addition, there was loads of players out. So Mejbri wasn't playing, Fernandez wasn't playing, Iqbal wasn't playing, Savage wasn't playing. Well, there's 4 players who would normally start in that match. So they were unavailable. Ahmad has been out 4 months through injury and was thrown straight back in it. So, he's going to be a bit rusty. I noticed he's in the Champions League 25 going out to Atalanta. So that'll all be good training and getting him back up to speed, which is great. But, I think I said in the last show, we have had a policy the last couple of years, particularly this season, of playing players up. So on the under 18s, we had 4 15-year-olds on the bench last week, and we had 3 in the bench this week. 15-year-olds playing under 18 football, that's a huge jump. And on the bench we had McNeil and Mainu, Kobe Mainu, who last year was playing under 16 football. He's now in the, came on as reserve for the reserves, if you like. So he's jumping like 6 or 7 years. And that's a real big challenge. And so what you're going to get is you're going to get a lot of inconsistency. It's just what you're going to get when you're playing very young players upper level. And I don't know if you lads played football yourself to any level, but if you're 16 and you're playing against 20, 21 and 22-year-olds, that is a massive difference. It doesn't matter how good you are at 16, you've got to be something exceptional to be able to go into a team and influence a team at that age. Now, Kobe Maino's had a cracking season for the 18s. He's been a bit of a monster. But to push him up to the 23s and expect him to do anything, and as you said earlier, we only had 4 subs because we've got so many injuries. So I'm not making excuses. I think the big issue is putting our chances away. Apparently, Alanga and Shoretira had a couple of chances between them, and it didn't happen. And that's their learning thing. People keep saying, well, get them in the first team, get them in the first team. Well, if they're not going to take chances in the reserves, in the second string, then they're not ready for the first team. What Solskjaer will do is he'll continue to give them, cameos here and cameos there in order to build their confidence and build their experience. But none of these lads are ready for the first team in any shape or form.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. But sorry, Ben, I'll let you jump in a second. But because I didn't know about that kind of policy that was out there, because I was really frustrated that I think it was United Liverpool in the 23s clashed with United Everton at Old Trafford, and I was looking at it going, why didn't they just move that game at LSV to later in the day so fans at Old Trafford can go and watch United Liverpool later in the day, or make it early? I think because the Everton game was a 12:30 kickoff, and they had United Liverpool at LSV kicking off at 2 o'clock, and it was like, why didn't they just shift that to 4, 5? I just didn't know that was a thing that it can't be televised if it's clashing with Premier League.
Yeah. But the thing that's really interesting, Connor, is that last season, all our reserve games, when I say reserves, they've changed it from under 21s to under 23s, so I just call it the reserves. Okay. The second team. Last season, we played, and all previous seasons for many, many years, we played Mondays and Fridays. And for this year is the first season in a long, long time, they've decided to play Saturdays. Well, what happens now is a lot of people can't get to both games because of the clash. And so why they've done it, whoever is the scheduling person, it's got nothing to do with the first team. So Solskjaer and the first team, they don't dictate what happens with the reserves. That's a club policy decision. And who's making that decision? There's no, and I have to say this, the communication from the club and the website doesn't even give match reports. It's atrocious. No one's telling the fans anything at all. So nobody really knows. It's all guesswork and putting it together from different rumors you're hearing. But I'd love to know who it is, because I'd like to understand why are they doing it. It's really weird.
It is, like you said, though, Tony, it is pretty weird, because in the past, like you said, it was a Monday to Friday thing. And I remember I think United tweeted out, it's gone back old school. I think it was a few weeks back where the under-18s, 23s, and the first team were all playing at the same time, near enough, or on the same day. It used to be like that back in the day. And I'm thinking, but why though? Are you wondering why the 18s, your 23s, but possibly even has a knock on for the 16s as well? Why they can't put people on the bench? Why they have to bring people up, try and drag people up from different age groups? Because of injuries, and because like the first team might be having a couple at the 23s, for example, will have a couple on the bench, and 23s got injuries, so they're having to pull out for what the first team are taking and what the injuries they've had, they're pulling out of the 18s and whatever. It just seems one big clumpy mess to me, Surely somebody in the FA or the Premier League, because it is Premier League 2 at the end of the day, sure they should be looking at it and going, that's really hurting our product. We can't fill benches. We can't get as many as we can into, say, for example, Leeds Sports Village, because United are playing at Everton at home at Old Trafford at 12:30, and our game kicks off at 2 o'clock, for example. So we can only get a few hundred fans in instead of maybe 1,000 to 2,000. And my other question is, I don't know if you know, are they still playing, having to play at least 3 matches at Old Trafford this season?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I knew that was policy in previous seasons, that you're giving the lads experience. I know in the FA Youth Cup, the chances are they'll play the FA Youth Cup games at Old Trafford. That's an opportunity.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'll look into that. I don't know the answer.
Right, no problem, pal.
Yeah, it is interesting. I never really thought of it that way, to be honest. That because I just looked at it same as yourself, Tony. I keep an eye on the results of 20. I just looked at it and I thought, there's only 3 subs again. There's only 4 subs, and if, like you said, if you got injuries, suspensions, and these kind of things, you're plucking players from different age groups to, like you said, Ahmad's getting dragged. Well, I said dragged back. He probably needs to game some in the 23s, but you get him first teamers maybe dropping into the 23. You're getting under 18 players into the 23s and things like that. So it must have a kind of knock-on effect on these players as well, especially when you've got, I mean, it goes back to kind of what I said we did a show last week on the loan players that are out and about in the kind of Championship, League One and things like that. Do you think that this kind of exacerbates a problem that potentially some of these loan players might have to be pulled back because there's not enough players to fulfill a bench maybe in the 23s or 18s? Or do you think is there enough players, they just keep plucking them from different age groups?
I think they're not worried about results as much, and that might not be a good or a bad thing. I just think they're more worried about development. So, for example, with the 18s a couple of weeks ago when we played Wolves, there was 4 15 years. Zach Giggs's boy was on the bench. There was 3 14-year-olds and 1 15-year-old, and none of them got a run. I think Zach Giggs got the last 2 minutes or something because someone got a knock. But the policy will be, we'll play the 11. And regardless of the result, we'll keep the 11 on the pitch because we might not want to play the 4 youngsters. But if we do need to play them, we'll throw them in. Not throw them in, that's unfair, but we'll give them a run because otherwise they wouldn't be in the academy and they wouldn't be good enough to be on the bench in the first place. And they're going to learn something from the experience. And that's what the most important thing is. There's this constant debate between development versus results. And I think at 16 level, I'm a firm believer in development over results. But the minute you get to 18, I change my mind. And I think it's more, even at under 23, I think it's more about results than development, or at least a balance of the two. Because if you're at that age, 18 years old, and you suddenly get called in the first team, you can't suddenly switch it on and go, oh, it's not about my development anymore. This is all about the results. Because you're going to get a first team player in the dressing giving you a right bloody bollocking if you've made a mistake. And it's no good being nice to each other in the 17s and 18s and 23s if that's not what it's real like in the real world. And, and I always use the analogy, if you leave school at 16 and go, become a plumber's mate, you will learn very, very quickly what the real world is like as a plumber's mate or an electrician or whatever the case may be. They don't say, oh, he's under an apprenticeship. That's not how life works. The minute you hit adult football, you've got to have an adult mentality. And that adult mentality is win at all costs within the frameworks of the game and et cetera, et cetera. So as a consequence, I think there's a huge challenge with keeping a development mindset, an only development mindset in the 18s. It has to be development, but if it has to be results as well. But if you've got a lack of players, then you've got to tread very carefully. Because I wouldn't want, on the weekend, Jack Morehouse got called into the 18s, Kobe Mania got called into the 23s. You don't want their development being affected because all of a sudden they're launching into tackles to trying to win a ball to save a last, goal because they don't want to lose at Spurs. I'd rather KB Manu not do that because he's not going to learn anything by doing a stupid, reckless tackle, just to save a game. That doesn't make sense. So I'm seeing both sides. However, if that was Phil Jones, I'd expect to throw his life on the line to save a goal because he's an experienced footballer who knows what it's like. And Ted and Mengi, I'd expect him to do that. And this season, Bjorn Hardley, I'd expect him to throw his. They're experienced under 23 players now, so it's less about development and developing resilience and mindset and, how to bounce back when things we'd lost 6-0 the week before. So how do you bounce back from that? You've got to have a bit of grit, a bit of determination, a bit of, you're going to over communicate instead of under communicate. That's all the non-footballing type of stuff. They're all good footballers. They don't have to learn how to play football. It's other things they're going to have to learn, which often comes from within, how to not switch off. So maybe that's a great learning for them, how to not switch off in the 92nd minute, Connor. That's, they did really well. They didn't lose a lot of goals. They played a lot better in their performance, but they switched off in the 92nd. Now that can happen, it's not just first team or second team. We all do that. But that's a learning process. I haven't seen the game. I don't know who switched off, but somebody must have for that goal to be scored, unless it was a worldie that no one could save, but that's not what I read. So someone's made a mistake somewhere. But I'm not concerned. I think this is an evolutionary thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring this one up from Jarvis. I want to get a question from the audience there. He's asking, our players who develop early the biggest talents, I feel academies rushing them. He read a statistic about the biggest talents, most of them born from January to March. I believe that's what he's on about. I don't know if that has any bearing.
Yeah, there's a relative age thing that's been part of football for some time, and it's to do with the academic year and the football season, the calendar. So what you generally find is you generally find. So, for instance, when I was at school, I was born in May, and the school season finished at a certain time. So I was always the youngest in my class. So when you're competing at an intellectual and an academic level, there was kids in my class who were a year older. So their spelling was better, their writing was better, their ability to synthesize and take information was better. They were 12 months older than me. So you've got certain boys in an academy who could theoretically be 12 months, just under 12 months physically younger than other players, but also 12 months emotionally younger and 12 months, intellectually younger. And so their decision making is 12 months less experienced. Their physicality is 12 months less experienced. So what Jarvis is talking about is relative age has a massive impact in football. And that is why United have a policy pretty much of not looking at size. They'll look at talent and potential. And the fact that these kids might be smaller in relative age terms than kids the same age, they just don't factor that in because they all know that when they're all 22, 23, 24, it's irrelevant by then anyway. So I think I don't Jarvis's comment about do you always rush the young talent? I'm not sure that's the case. If you look at the history, what United tend to do is be pretty. What's the right way of saying this? They'll actually push all of them in different ways. So the other day there was 2 or 3 fullbacks, then there's 2 or 3 midfielders, then there's 2 or 3 strikers. So they're not pushing any one kid particular. They're giving kind of everybody a chance to get the step up. And if I go back to those 3 14-year-olds on the bench for the under-18s, just being on the bench is great experience. That's the first step. You're experiencing a completely different pre-match talk. The guys, the under-18s are expecting a little bit more competitiveness. The result does matter to some extent. There's pressure on for places. You want to play the following week. So they're learning all of that stuff, how to deal with that. And then, in the case of 1 or 2 players coming on for the last 5 minutes, play your natural game, don't try too hard. Then how do they deal with getting pushed back to the 16s the following week? Or, Kobe Mainoo is going to be back in the 18s next week. How does he deal with that? Because, they get their confidence and they get, and I'm saying this in the nicest way, the arrogance and the, all of that stuff. And you've got to control that because they can get ahead of themselves. Then you push them back down and say, okay, you've had a taste. Now you're back in. You've got to show me week in, week out. And all of that is really good development. So to be fair, I think we're really good at not pushing people for the sake of pushing it. Those kids who are coming through probably deserve it. The 16-year-olds who are getting into the 18s, they're probably McAllister, Nolan, 1 or 2 others. They're probably the better players in that age group, Ogunai. So, these kids are getting chances, but they deserve it. And so
just bringing up a comment from Andrew. He's mentioning a player in particular about Ethan Ennis. I've got to be honest, I can't give an opinion because I can't say I've heard of him too much. Is it a player that you've heard of, and what do you think of him?
Yeah, he had a particularly good game against us last season in the FA Youth Cup when we got knocked out by Liverpool. And I think and he scored a hat-trick against somebody the round before or the round after, I can't remember. And he was out of contract with Liverpool and we offered him and he's come to the club and he's been playing predominantly in the 16s. He works very hard when he's got the ball. His work off the ball, not so much. I think he's not as technically, for me anyway, he's not as technically gifted as some of the other kids that I'm watching coming through the system. But the thing you always have to remember, and I thought Huggle was the same, but he's come on a lot. I think, the coaches obviously see something. They rate him, which is why they've got him in the team. I think he's definitely, we just have to wait and see from him. But at the moment, I've not been overly impressed with anything that I've seen. Nothing, there's no wow factor there at all. But then again, like I say, I'm not expecting one. Is he one to watch? Maybe, but I'd be naming other players before him.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think with the 23s and 18s, there is a lot of, especially with United. I think if you come through the academy, every player is a one to watch. I feel like a lot of players do get not overhyped because they're clearly good if they're playing at that level in the academy. But I do feel like as soon as somebody scores, like, yep, that's one to watch for the future, one to watch for the future. And I think we spoke about this last time you were on about the difference between almost like one to watch. Like one to watch doesn't mean United first team. That could mean going on to have a career in League One and League Two and these kind of things. Just it kind of brings on nicely to the, obviously the main topic that we briefly wanted to talk about, and it's talking about obviously Ole and things like that. Shafter has mentioned about the loan system. Do you know, obviously from a couple of years ago, I know obviously COVID's having an impact. What's Ole's kind of view on the academy, if you will? Like obviously Sir Alex was a big part of the academy when he came in and almost overhauled it back, when he came in charge. Do you see kind of resemblance with Ole? Has he got the same mentality with the academy, or is it just it's like a nice to have and you bring players through?
Oh God, no! I think he's 100% behind it, and I think he understands it, and I think he definitely believes in it. I mean, if you look at his statistics. I mean, let me just give you an example. And this is just a couple of statistics that I was working on earlier today. In Jose's first season, 2016-17, he gave 118 games to academy players. So that's, a number of different players playing more than once over the season. Now, out of those 118 games, only 12 games were with new players that he'd brought in. The others were with players from from Bengal. The following season, he played 128 games and he brought no new players through. And in his third season, half a season, he played 48 games and no new players were brought through. Now, out of the new players he did bring in, 4 of them was in the last game of the season against Crystal Palace. So in actual fact, Mourinho didn't do a blinking thing with our academy for all intents and purposes. And when I was down there regularly on Saturdays watching the games, he was never there. I never, ever saw him. With Solskjaer, you always see him down there. You see him on MUTV. He's watching the games. He's talking to the coaching staff. So there's a completely different philosophy behind it. And if you look at Solskjaer's record, he's in his first season, it was 77 games. Got to remember, Mourinho was 44. In his next season, 295 games for players using 17 different players, including 7 new players. So what he's doing, as far as Solskjaer, and in his second season, it was 280 games. So he is clearly and 13 players. So he's clearly having a completely different view from Mourinho in terms of the number of players he's bringing in and he's trying to give a chance to. And he's given Williams a chance. He's given Henderson a chance. He's given Tuanzebe a chance. More games for Tuanzebe. He's given. McTominay. Everybody talks about Mourinho, being McTominay's, love child or whatever that crap was. But people forget in Mourinho's last season, he only started McTominay in 3 out of the 24 games. So if everyone's saying that he was really pushing Scott's career, I don't see any evidence of it. Certainly gave him a run, but he only started 3 games. Whereas as soon as he left him and Solskjaer came in, Solskjaer played him in 13 games. So where's the championing youth in those 2 aspects? So I think Solskjaer gets the youth. He believes in the youth. I mean, look at the game the other day. You've got Greenwood, Rashford, Lingard, Pogba, McTominay. There's 5 out of the 11. That's nearly half a team. He only can put 5 more in, and then doesn't matter how good you are, he can't play you. So I think people forget. I mean, we spoke about this statistic on the last show. With all the foreign imports, if you can get half a team from the youth side, I think that's unbelievable. And Solskjaer's doing that. So I think he's 100% behind it. I don't have any issues at all with how Solskjaer regards our youth system at all.
On Ole as well, though, just being a presence around the youngsters. And those of them that would have experienced maybe Jose's side of things as well, like where Jose was never around. But just imagine how big that makes you feel as a youngster when you see that the first team manager's on the side there watching you play, asking questions to the various different coaches, and who's the next one I should be watching out for? How's Charlie McNeil playing today? How's he doing in the 23s? Has he managed to make the step up all right? That should just bring a huge confidence back into United, because the thing is with rumours, you always hear about rumours. Some of it's true, some of it's not, some of it's absolute utter garbage. But apparently with Mourinho, though, you've alluded to there, like he just didn't give a damn. You know, everything went to hell. You know, and the 23 suffered from it, the 18 suffered from it. You know, from what I've heard anyway. And I remember you probably know Dave Pritt, my friend Dave Pritt. He used to go to all the academy matches, and I remember when Mourinho did play at the end of the season, played a few of the youngsters against Palace, and I remember him kicking off big time, going, where have they been all season, you know. It just seems to have, for me, it harms development. I think, you know, when you see like managers are not interested. I think didn't Harrod leave that season because he played against Palace, and he left it at the end of that season, even though he scored against Palace, you know, and he probably thought, well, under Jose, I don't think there's any future for me, you know.
He was told that. He was told that.
Yeah.
His father was told that the chances of Josh getting a game were incredibly remote. So even though he was offered a new contract, he rejected it because he thought, I'm not going to get first team football. I mean, just here's another statistic for you. When and he's just, excuse me while I look at the notes. Van Gaal brought in Wilson, Blackett, James Thorpe, Janko, Lingard, Pereira, McNair, Love, Rashford, Borthwick, Jackson, Weir, Riley, and Fosu Mensah. When Mourinho took over, he only played 3 of those players ever again. He basically wiped the lot. This is why when people say change the manager, this is the impact it has on the infrastructure. So all of a sudden, 20 lads are going somewhere else because the manager is going to bring in all these new players. And I guarantee. And by the way, I'm not going to get into the whole Ole in out. That's not why I'm here. But if you keep changing the management, don't get me wrong. If the manager needs to go, then I think we all agree the manager needs to go, and we have to manage it accordingly. But it's not just the first team that, you know, chopping and changing makes. You know, when Van Gaal went, all of a sudden Mourinho comes in. Mourinho goes, Solskjaer comes in, and they all have to manage it, and they're under pressure for results, and they need to get off to a good start. And the kids don't see a pathway. And if the kids don't see and here's the other thing you got to remember, not you guys, but people have to remember, we can't recruit from abroad anymore. Brexit has stopped that, so and that includes Ireland. So we're only going to be able to recruit from England, Scotland, and Wales, which means our resource to get those players in is difficult. So players now have got a choice of where they go to. And if they don't see a pathway to the first team, they will choose other clubs. And as a consequence, what that means is it's even more difficult to attract young talent to our academy. Now, at the moment, they're seeing Greenwood and Williams and Tuanzebe, and last season, Fish and Mejbri and Shoretire and Alanga. And then the next time they're playing with them. So the Fernandezes and the Jurados and the Garnachos and McNeils and the Hugels, you know, and they're looking at, I'm playing with this kid in last week, he was in the first team. And, you know, and next week, and there's a chance for me. Then, you know, then it's real. It's real because they're in the changing room saying to Alanga, what was it like coming off the bench and scoring against Wolves or whatever? And he's just buzzing the whole time. And the kids say, I want a bit of that. I want a part of that. I want to be. But if they're saying, I'm nowhere near it, and there's no one in that dressing room who can experience it, how do you have any evolution of your youth policy? How does that work? And you know, I was talking to a friend the other day about Newcastle United, right? They've sacked Bruce. You know, they've got one of the worst records in the history of English football for bringing kids through. The worst. Now, they haven't won a trophy for 50 years. You think they'd try it, wouldn't you? You think, you know, buying people and changing your manager every 2 minutes isn't working for their success. Not one trophy in 50 years. And they're supposed to be one of the biggest clubs in the world, one of the biggest clubs in Britain, and they don't have a youth policy. Well, I'm just joining dots thinking maybe they should try it because everything else is failing them. And I don't really care about Newcastle, but I think, you know, there's some parallels to remember for our club. You've got to be very, very careful.
Yeah,
changing managers doesn't help kids.
Yeah, and it's like not Jose, Ollie's interim period as well. And you've got the likes of that famous night in Paris. You had Chong, Gomez, McTominay, Rashford, Greenwood, all involved. Half of them were on the pitch, and like I said, the other half were kind of on the bench. You had so many academy players in the team that were like, and like you said there, it's not just necessarily match experience because some of them didn't get on, but just to talk about it. You know, what was that night like? You know, in Paris, you know, that famous away game in the Champions League, and you know, you've got hope. Then you're looking at these players, you're looking at Greenwood, and even players that are on loan, Chong and Laird, you know, doing really well in the Championship. There's potential that they're looking at it going, oh well, if I come back, there's an opportunity. But
and I also think that, you know, and this is an opinion. I also think that having those good players in the background puts pressure on the likes of the first team players. So people said the other day after the Liverpool game that, you know, Shaw hasn't been his same player. Well, no wonder he hasn't got Williams, you know, kicking him in, you know, pushing him and kicking him from, if you don't play badly, I'm gonna get a run of games. Shaw lost his place to Williams last season, but he hasn't got that at the moment. I'd like to see Laird pushing Wan-Bissaka. And Laird's played brilliantly for Swansea. I think he's one of their best players. They love him down there. So that loan moves worked really well. Someone in the chat said loan moves are really tough. Loan moves are the hardest thing in the world to get right. No club can get it right. We certainly don't. It's an absolute lottery. And I just noticed that Shaffman has said that, you know, it's not about jumping up from an ability perspective. He's absolutely right. It's about the mentality and the lifestyle. This is huge learning for some of these kids. And that's a big jump. They've been at Old Trafford since they've been 16. They've been mollycoddled, and I'm meaning that in the nicest positive way. I don't mean negatively, but they've been really looked after. And they haven't had any real setbacks, and they need that to get that grit that I was talking about earlier. So it was a great comment. And the other thing that you've got is midfield, young midfielders. I see a comment from Che or Kay there. You know, midfield is the hardest to bring a young person into because it's that central pitch is the most physical of all of them. And you have to be a dynamo. You don't get that dynamo at 16, 17. You haven't got the physique. So Garner going out to Forest, Galbraith at Doncaster, they're doing very, very well. But again, they're at Doncaster level. Can they do it at our level? I don't know yet. We'll see. Mainu, who's stepped up and he's doing great things with the under-18s. He's a million miles away from the first team. He knows that. The club knows that. He's on a development program to help him get there. Will he make it? We'll wait and see. I mean, Pogba had to go to, you know, everyone thinks Pogba was ready, you know, back in 2011. I remember watching Pogba when he made his debut at Crewe in 2008. He'd have one good game, one bad game, and one anonymous game. You know, and Ferguson said, look, until you can get consistency, I can't trust you in the first team. And so we'll offer you a new contract, you know, we'll give you more games, but he decided to go away to Juventus. Now people think he suddenly was at Juventus for his first season. He wasn't even in the top. They had three midfielders. He wasn't even the top four appearances in his first season at Juventus. Everybody forgets that. He was the fifth most played midfielder in Juventus's first season. It was only in his second and third that he came through because he was 12, 18 months older. And that was in a slower league. Now, you could also argue he's come back to United and he's the same. One good game, one average game, one anonymous game. You know, and that's the consistent. And he's a bloody good player. But who's got that consistency? I don't think you're going to get it from an academy player. I think academy, for midfielders anyway, I think they do have to go out and toughen up. They do have to go out. And it's all right playing for West Ham and all these other clubs. The pressure's not on you at the top four level. Very few central midfielders in any of the clubs have come through in recent years. We did it with Nicky Butt. Liverpool did it with Gerrard. You know, that was 20 years ago. You know, now, you know, Liverpool haven't got their own midfielder at 20 who's playing 20 games a season, 40 games a season. Chelsea aren't doing it. They've got attacking midfielders. That's different. But in that role that we need, I think that's a very hard position to develop, because you're talking about, you know, how do you develop a Brian Robson? How do you develop a Roy Keane and a Paul Ince? They don't come along every often. So if they, you know, we talk about maybe Declan Rice or, you know, whoever the options might be, we might have to just accept that, you know, United are very good at producing certain types of players, the forward line, the fullbacks, central defenders, perhaps, but getting a really good centre midfielder. I mean, everyone in the world wants to do that. So unless you get somebody and you think that they can do it, then it becomes very difficult. At the moment, in our academy, I don't see anybody there at the moment who can do it. But then, you know, you just have to give people time. You know, people develop it different ways. People switch it on, and that's the great thing about, and that is what's great about academy football. You just don't know what you're going to get. You know, it's brilliant. You just watch them develop, you see them grow, and then when you see them come out at the other end, you go, wow. I never saw McTominay do whatever he's doing. Never saw it happen. You know, you see it with Greenwood. I never saw it with Rashford. I never saw it with Beckham. I never saw it with Gary Neville. I can give you a whole handful of players I never saw it with, and only a few players where you say, yeah, I saw it straight away and it was evident and it came to fruition. But it's very difficult to predict.
Yeah, go on, Benny.
No, I was going to say on that. Do you think now, this day and age, and the way football's going now, are we going to see less of the Gerrards, you know, the likes of Steven Gerrards that come in quite early, stake a first team place, stay there? And I was thinking like Wayne Rooney at the age of 16 at Everton coming in, pretty much scored that goal against Arsenal, then he was in and out a little bit, and then he was Everton first team, did well at England level, got his move to United and everything. Do you think that now these days, especially the way that football's evolving now, it's a quicker game, it's getting more physical out there now as well, in terms of physical fitness as well as mental fitness? Do you think now in the modern game that it's going to be less likely you're going to see people at the age of 16, 17 and 18 breaking through into the first team and keeping their places there? We have seen it with the likes of Rashford and Greenwood, for example, at 18, 19, coming through and keeping their places in the first team. But it just seems fewer and fewer kids compared to back in the 80s and the 90s that are coming through at that sort of 16, 17, 18 age group that cement their place in the first team. Do you think that's now the bygone era?
I don't know. I think the first thing you have to remember, in the 80s and 90s, you didn't have the foreign input. So you had 11 places. You had 11 places available for 11 English players every single week. Now you've got 6 places available because 5 of them are taken up with foreign players, and that's across the board in every league. You know, that's not just the Premier League; that's the Championship and so on and so forth. So you've got a smaller number of holes to fill. So now what you have is you've got a much more competitive environment for those X number of players. And if there's 1,800 places every Saturday and only 900 of them are actually available, then you've got 92 academies trying to fill 900 places, which is ridiculous, really. But that's the challenge. And so are we going to still see players come through? Absolutely. Are they going to be the best in the world? Probably not, because you don't produce that as often. Are we capable of doing it? Yeah, we've proved it. We proved it with Rashford. We've proved it with Greenwood. We proved it with Lingard. We proved it with a lot of it. Okay, anybody, we'll all have subjective views about whether these players are world-class stars or whatever. But the fact is, they're 17, 18, and they're playing. In Rashford's first season, he played 57 games. Greenwood played 49. So that's a lot of football for an 18-year-old kid. And there's a lot of pressure on them. We talked about the mental pressure. I think the modern midfielder, there's so much to that game. You got to be smart, and you're coming up against even kids who are 3 or 4 years older than you, who are streetwise on the pitch. So they'll do things on the ball and they'll do things off the ball that a 17-year-old won't see in academy football. And so it takes time to get used to that. That's why I think Garner and Galbraith and others being out on loan, I think they're going to learn that. They'll learn tricks, if you know what I mean. They'll learn those little things that you cannot learn in academy football. And unfortunately, Rooney had it because he was playing street football, and Gerrard had it because he was playing street football. And I'll say one more thing. I'm conscious of time. You guys have got to shoot off, but there's also an element of, I'm going to say this in the nicest possible way: be angry, be emotional, be that self-determination. A lot of kids haven't got that, so they've got to struggle against kids who have got that. Because if you've got someone who's really angry, and I don't mean negatively angry, I just mean grit, determination, focus. You get my point. That kid's got a head start because that kid just hates losing. And I think, unless the kids today hate to lose, then you can't just switch it on. So in midfield, you've got to teach them how not to lose. That is a mindset. Someone said, Neil Wood, is he a good coach? I think he is. I think he is a good coach. And he's good at understanding that psychological side of the game. What we don't see is we don't see him screaming and yelling and stuff on the sideline. But that's never been United's way anyway. Very few of our managers have ever done that. You see other managers doing it, but it doesn't help the kids.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about the mentality. We had a Birmingham and Swansea fan on last week talking about Chong and Laird, and the one thing that they both said is their attitude is what surprised them, especially Chong. He was talking about his work rate in particular, sprinting back into defence, and that attitude. He linked it very well with Troy Deeney. Obviously, it will help bring kind of a player like Chong through at Swansea. They've got a lot of good role models there, and their manager actually obviously worked with Laird at MK Dons as well, didn't he? So obviously there's a lot of role models there. So yeah, it's interesting you say that about the mentality. So I think a lot of our youngsters, I've always been under the impression mentality is not really something you can necessarily teach. I think you've either got it or you haven't, especially if you want to make it at the very top level. So yeah, there's so many facets to becoming a professional footballer, and I think you've said it on both shows that you've been on with us that all of these kids are technically good. It's that jump from being technically good to being a well-rounded player. So
yeah, the last question there, apart from Greenwood, who else has Ollie brought through? Henderson he's brought through, Williams he's brought through. All these players have played 30, 40, 50 games. I'm just trying to think. Obviously, loads have got a few games. Tuanzebe, Pereira, he played Pereira. Pereira played hardly any games before Solskjaer. And I mean, whether you rate them or not, not the question. The question is he giving them a chance? And I think Pereira played 40 games, 2 seasons running under Solskjaer. So, he's giving Tuanzebe again 30 or 40 games. He's giving these players a chance. Whether they're taking it, different question. Are they good enough? Different question. Will they survive? Different question. But is he giving them a chance? Sure. And he can only play so many. He's already got 5 in the team. How many more can he play? And here's the last thing to get ahead of Rashford, you've got to be better than Rashford. To be ahead of Greenwood, you've got to be better than Greenwood. To be ahead of Pogba, you've got to be better than Pogba. So you've got to be better than the players in there. Otherwise, you're not going to get a chance. That whole Van der Beek conversation is an interesting one. If he's not pulling up trees in the training, how's he going to get ahead of Fernandes and Pogba and all the others? And he can't be pulling up trees. Otherwise, everybody would be whinging about it. He can't be doing it in training. Otherwise, he'd be forcing himself into the team. And youth players don't get a free passage. They have to earn that to get to that first team. They've got to work, as you just said with Chong, they've got to work on and off the ball to get there. And you've got to be better than the player already there. That's straight back to Matt Busby and the Busby Babes. You've got to be better than Duncan Edwards. Otherwise, you're not getting your place in midfield. And that's why no one did. And that's why that's why Duncan Edwards never lost his place. He was never dropped. There's a reason for that. Or Norman Whiteside, or Mark Hughes, or any of these great players. They weren't dropped for a reason.
Yeah, 100%. That feels a good way to end it. Obviously, Tony, do you want to shout? Obviously, your socials are down there, but also you've got a book as well. Because I just want to shout out Shaf as well. Brilliant. Thanks for all the comments and the super chat there as well. I really appreciate that. Obviously on the channel.
Thanks for the comments, everybody. That was good.
Obviously, Tony, you've got a book out. I think Benny's gonna hold it up again. Obviously, you shouted out on the last show. Are there still some available to buy?
Yeah, there's still some available. People can tweet me. We can happily get books to people. We're running out. We've only got about 20 or 30 left at the moment. If anybody attends games, we sell them outside the Must office after games, £10 each. So they're a bargain at the moment. If anybody wants one, you can pick one up.
Brilliant. Nice one. Definitely go and make sure you check those out. Tony, it's been brilliant to have you back on. We're definitely going to keep getting you back on because I've still got so many questions. I think we're going to have to make the next one a 2-hour special because I've still got so many things to go through. Make sure you like and subscribe. There's plenty of content on All for United for the rest of the week. We've got Atalanta tomorrow. Fingers crossed. It's another 3 points on the board. So yeah, stay tuned for the match reaction and everything else for the rest of the week. See you guys soon.